to chair this meeting and also our INSEAD Alumni Healthcare Club, which we started in France about a year ago. The idea being to have the ability to exchange views, discuss on a topic we're all passionate about, which is healthcare. And so we're very happy today to have the opportunity to chat and discuss the topic of the future of healthcare with four distinguished panelists, and Thierry will introduce them later on today. Thank you to all of them for accepting to do that. We are recording this conference, and yes, the recording will be shared through our LinkedIn page, and you will be able to ask questions in the chat. So please use the chat for your question, as some of you have already started. When we were preparing this, I thought I would introduce the theme of future of healthcare, not so much by providing already perspectives on what this should look like or be about, etc. And we will let our panelists actually discuss that. But I wanted, as a starter, to actually share a few perspectives that we've put together, that the McKinsey Global Institute has put together, on basically the case for investing into healthcare. So why are we all right to be interested in healthcare and to be interested in improving health? And so if you look over the last 80 years, we've made great progress in terms of increasing life expectancy rate, and arguably, things have really started to pick up with the Industrial Revolution, and obviously with a series of changes to techniques, to changes to sanitary conditions, the onset of drugs, etc. And we are seeing a life expectancy continuing to progress, and these numbers are for Europe. However, if you actually look a little bit into what has been happening, you actually find out that over the last 10 years, this growth in life expectancy has also meant, and we see contrasting situations from country by country, to a number of these additional years of life being actually gained, but without people being in good health, right? And so actually France is doing very well on that matter. The 1.5 years of life expectancy gained was actually mostly gained in good health, but we also see much more contrasted pictures of countries where the populations has grown older, but also sicker on average, and so that obviously raised a question as to what can be done about this, and what is it, in a way, the potential to continue improving not just life expectancy, but also life expectancy in good health. And so the Global Institute has launched, and that's about 1.5 years ago, a study around the potential that exists to actually improve this. And so we've actually looked at the burden of disease and started to evaluate and model the potential impact in terms of reduction of the disease burden, measured in DALYs. So these disability adjusted life years of basically different conditions and different elements of the disease burden. And so this is, and I won't go through the details of this, I promise, but you essentially see here, burden by burden, what the model tells us in terms of how much of the burden could actually be alleviated and addressed. And again, we see very contrasted perspectives with some some areas where, only a fraction of the disease burden is preventable with, the interventions that we already have at hand today. And mental disorders is actually at the bottom of that scale. And then there are, that would be no surprise, a number of things around infectious diseases, where there's a lot of proven interventions that will allow us to reduce the disease burden. And you find also here just a view of which are the bigger contributor to the overall disease burden reduction. Cancers, diabetes, kidney disease, cardiovascular, et cetera, et cetera. The other interesting thing, we actually then analyze where the potential in reduction comes from, modeling the potential impact of these interventions. It's quite interesting to see that we end up with quite a balance, equilibrium between three main types of interventions, right? Number one is what we can do to basically address the environment, the social and the behaviors. So, this is behavioral health, this is environmental prevention, this is addressing social determinants of health, right? A second bucket of the same importance is everything that has to do really with prevention and the promotion of health. And you'll find there, things like vaccination, but also, actually drugs that are used for preventative purposes, right? Statins could be a good example of that. And then the third category is really around, treating. So it's therapeutic, where again, we'll find, no surprise, medical, surgical treatment, but also, things like physio or psychological therapy. And so it's quite interesting to see that eventually, alleviating the disease burden will actually require kind of this balanced mix of interventions. And actually, the modeling says that if we were to apply these proven interventions, essentially we could reduce the disease burden to a point where 65 would be the new 55, i.e. we would expect the population to have the same state of health at 65 that the population has today at 55, right? In our scenario. So very, very obvious gains in terms of, again, healthy life expectancy. The other thing that the MGI did was actually trying to reflect on, what is the potential economic impact of this improvement of the health of the population. And the modeling tells us that, and that's the case for Europe, we could essentially by 2040 gain about 0.5% of economic growth per year if we were able to really implement this set of interventions. It's actually quite interesting that the four ways that better health translates into economic growth are actually quite different. The mix is quite different from one region to another. In Europe, the biggest impact would actually come from expanding what we've called the expanding of the participation, meaning actually getting a larger fraction of the potential workforce, put them in a position to actually work. And there actually the two main elements of impact is, the people that will be around 55 to 65 and 70 is ensuring that through better health these people can stay active longer. And then the second impact is actually the impact of caregivers, informal caregivers that get out of the job market to take care of relatives, right? And these are the two main factors that would actually contribute to economic growth in Europe. And then if we believe that modeling, for a country like France, it represents something like 700 billion of welfare gain. And it means that, if we look at the modeling of how much, these interventions actually cost, we would get a roughly 2.3 times return on every euro we invest in those interventions. And so, again, just to say, as a matter of introduction, that this question of the future of healthcare and how we continue shape and transform our healthcare systems and the way we, prevent illness and then, treat it, are not just important from a, I would say health and societal impact, but also will have a direct economic impact on our European economies. So with that, I'll pass on to Thierry and to our panelists to tell us more about their views on how to achieve that. Thierry.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good evening, everyone. So I am going to introduce our panelists for tonight. So we have Charles Grantham, who is co-founder of Alan, a new but already large insurance company, one of the French unicorns. We have Claire Biot, who is vice president for life science and healthcare industry with Dassault Systèmes. We have Kamel Zerwan, who is partner at Serena Capital, a venture capital company. And last but not least, Pascal Rocher, who is the general manager of Ramsay Santé. Before we start the discussion here tonight live, we are going to broadcast the interview of Laura Letourneau, who apologizes because she had a conflict of agenda conflict and could not be with us tonight, but was very kind to yesterday be interviewed so that we could get her point and her vision about the future of healthcare and her initiative as a ministerial delegate in charge of digital health, working directly with the Minister of Health in France. And so she accepted to tell us about her work and how her work is setting the ground for the future of healthcare.
This is Laura Letourneau. Thank you very much for being with us tonight for this interview that we are recording and that will be broadcasted during our roundtable tomorrow night on Thursday with the INSEAD Healthcare Club alumni for France. First, can you please introduce yourself? I can explain to our audience that you are the co-head of the e-health delegation for the Minister of Health here in France, and explain us also what is your vision, your view on the future of healthcare, in particular in France.
Hello, so thank you so much for the invitation, and sorry not to be here with you tonight. So I'm the co-head of the e-health delegation in France. So my role is to set up a vision and strategy, and the most difficult part to implement it. I always find it difficult to answer the question about the future of the healthcare system in France and in general, because first, like in other fields, the predictions we are doing are often wrong. Nobody or very few people predicted how much the internet was going to change all the aspects of our lives. For example, nobody or very few people predicted the pandemic or the 2008 financial crisis. So I think it's difficult because it's often wrong. And second, I also think that our answers are normally trite or banal in regard to e-health, for example. And I'm only going to talk about this because it's my field and I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about all the healthcare system in general. we have been repeating for 10 years that we are going to tend to a 5P medicine, to digital therapeutics, to AI, to blockchain, and that there are huge opportunities for a better prevention, for better diagnosis, for better care. And whereas now, in 2022, some nurses, for example, in a famous Parisian hospital, are still following the premature babies' weight on paper because they don't have an adapted information system in the hospital. So there is a big gap between the theory and the reality, and I prefer to focus on the presence of the healthcare system, or in any case, on the way we have to act collectively in the short term to improve it. And I think it's even more true with the public sector, as for me, for we public authorities, at least in years, are not supposed to create all the future innovative services, but we have to set up the rules and the infrastructures to other orders, people from the field, whether they are from the private sector, from the public sector, civil society as well, and they have to respect these rules and to lean on these infrastructures to innovate and to build the future hand in hand with us. So this vision is what we call the state as a platform model that I set up in a book I co-wrote some years ago, and which is the basis of the French ES roadmap we elaborated 3 years ago. And actually, it is inspired by the organization of a city. If you look at it, in a city, public authorities are actually expected to, on the one hand, define rules. In a city, traffic regulations rules, house designing rules, etc. And in ELs, there are 3 categories of rules: ethics, interoperability, and cybersecurity. And on the other hand, we public authorities have to provide with infrastructures. In a city, water and electricity system, roads, bridge, and in digital health, we have many infrastructure as well that are called digital commons. And at the national and the European level as well, with the European Health Data Set, which is coming. And for example, at the national level, you have Mon Espace Santé, My Health Space, which includes a national electronic health record and a messaging services. You have directories, you have e-prescription. And so the public authorities have to set up the rules and to build the infrastructures. And at the same time, the actors from the field have to innovate, respecting these rules and connecting to these infrastructures. In the city, they build houses and buildings that respect house designing rules and connect to the electricity network, for example. And in e-health, our houses are the digital tools, for example, remote monitoring services, health insurance app, hospital software. And these services have to respect the rules, interoperability, cybersecurity, and ethics, and to connect to our commons, Mon Espace Santé, e-prescription. And this infrastructure allows them to go faster than if they had to construct themselves these infrastructures, and they can skip the construction of the identification system or databases, for example, and directly focus on the added value for the patients and the healthcare professionals. So we public authorities relied on them, especially the private sectors, to do so in sort of a win-win approach between public and private sectors, and at the end for all the citizens.
Okay, so I understand then that the public authorities, they provide the rules and the infrastructures. So what are your expectations from these field actors in terms of what do you expect from them and your recommendation to them so that they ensure through their solutions the sustainability and the efficiency of the healthcare systems are going to help to design?
I think that we collectively, private sectors, but public sector as well, there are 2 traps in which we can't fall, which are the main enemies of public health. It's not money. We often think it's money, but I think it's not money. It's first governance. So public health, as you probably know, at least in France, but in many other countries as well, is very fragmented. There are many organizations, private and public ones, at the local, national, international levels. So it's vital to define clearly who is doing what and how we collaborate together. And it's also essential to put the citizen at the center of all the decisions to avoid corporatism, which is very strong in public health. For example, during a consensus conference, as the one we organized last year with 30 citizens selected as random from different social backgrounds, different parts of France, to give their opinion on not only the color button of Mon Espace Santé, but decisions as important as which healthcare professionals were allowed Mon Espace Santé access, for example. So this is the first point, governance. The second point we have to be careful with, and it's linked actually with the first question, it's being pragmatic. So on the one hand, we should dream big, and on the other hand, we have to move forward step by step, but not drag our feet. And then it works. For example, during the crisis, during the pandemics, we succeeded with private and public sector in connected 4,500 medical laboratories in only 3 weeks, whereas we were struggling to build a similar information system for other infectious diseases for 8 years. And this enabled us to come out of lockdown in June 2020, since we were then able to automatically collect the data and monitor the number of COVID positive people and to initiate the contact tracing process. So it was very important. And another example, maybe this year, we have also successfully launched the app Mon Espace Santé after 18 years of problems with its predecessor called the Shared Medical Record, DMP. And that we also reoriented in the state as a platform vision. So all of this is a dizzying work prospect, but I think it's necessary, and if we're working hand in hand all together, we will succeed.
Thank you very much, Laura. So I think it gives us a good introduction on the challenges and the opportunities that ES can provide for the future of healthcare, and a good opening for our roundtable tomorrow night. Thank you very much again, Laura, for your availability.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
We are back now live. So indeed, it's a good introduction for our roundtable tonight, that the public authorities have been setting the rules and preparing for the infrastructure for the private actors that we have tonight to put successful solution in place. And we are going to start with Charles Grantham. Donc, Charles, you are a co-founder of Alan, which is a pretty recent insurance company because you were founded in 2016, but you grew very rapidly and impressively. And you have a strong vision in that company about what will make healthcare successful, what are some of the solutions that are important. And I think that one of the things that you share with the vision of Laura Letourneau is also the importance, the position of the patient in that setup, and giving the voice to the citizen and the patient in the makeup of the healthcare system.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Thierry, for this introduction. I agree completely with Laura on the topic of putting back the human at the center of the system. We really think that the current health system is running out of gas. It needs to make a number of improvements. We can see that by seeing that health was the first concern of French people in 2021. We often hear that modern medicine has forgotten the patient behind the disease. And so concretely, what does that mean? We have a health system that is impersonal, where prevention represents only 2% of the expenses. We have more than 13 million French people who are affected by mental health disease, especially going out of that of the pandemic, where it was really hard for mental health for many French people. And we have more and more medical deserts. We have 7 million French people living in areas with low number of general practitioners. We have 7 out of 10 health professionals who are experiencing burnouts. So you see the picture. We really think that it's time for a transformation of our health system. And as Laura said, we need to get the basics right while we're doing that transformation. And so what's our vision? How do we move forward from that? At Alan, we believe that we can have a preventative and personalized healthcare system that is centered around the citizen. A system in which health goes beyond the simple curative framework and integrates the physical and mental well-being of each citizen. And this is the vision that we're trying to implement every day at Alan. So what can that vision look like? Let's imagine Ada's story. Ada uses predictive tools to take preventative and individualized action on her own health concerns. So through this system, Ada would have access to 24/7 digital medical team that's powered by artificial intelligence that helps her answer most of her questions, that guides her through the healthcare system, and that makes her feel more at ease with her own problems. One of the big issues is the lack of orientation. She also received predictive and proactive care notifications that make it easier for her to access preventative solutions and make her experience more seamless healthcare. And finally, she can interact with the community of patients like herself and really share what's on her mind and what's been troubling her about her health. And for us, that's just the beginning. We still have like many things to build for the health experience. And I think it would be a really great debate for this panel to discuss what a great health experience could be like in a few years.
Indeed, yeah, thank you very much, Charles. And if we move now to Claire, so Claire, in Dassault system, you are the big champion of creating very advanced digital tools to help the industry become more performant in different sectors of the industry. And you are in particular in charge of the healthcare sector, healthcare and life science. So what does that mean? What kind of tools are you putting together? And how do you want this tool to create an impact on the healthcare system? What's your vision on that? And I think that you have also something about the position of the patient in your vision too, the same as Laura and Charles.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, we can.
From my phone.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have a vision that's clearly centered on the patient. I can just echo what Charles or Laura said. And when you think about the patient, it's kind of scary to look at the numbers that Thomas has showed, because over the past years, the healthy life expectancy has progressed more slowly than the life expectancy. And so there is something wrong about the system. And so what we care about is really to contribute to increase the healthy life expectancy, but making sure that it's done with sustainable healthcare systems, because we not only want to finance our own health, but the healthcare for our children and the children of our children. And so when you hear Dassault systems, a lot of you guys hear Bassel, you think about aircraft, and actually we are a spin-off from Dassault Aviation 40 years ago. And when I look at the newspapers this morning, it's kind of striking that we see that Boeing 777 that almost crashed in Paris. And we were all very worried. We're like, oh my God, one car that almost crashed, this should be impossible. There is a lot of simulation about the aircraft before they move up. The pilots have to go through a lot of simulation. And so we are very surprised that this Boeing crashed. But at the same time, medical errors, they are the third major cause of death in developed countries. They are so common because the way practitioners are trained, it's not going to go to crash test or simulation. And so we think that we can really position virtual twins of the human body as an enabler for medical practice excellence. And what we call a virtual twin is really building a referential where you're going to gather knowledge and know-how from doctors, healthcare professionals, nurses. And because you create that referential where people can see that knowledge and know-how, they can start making predictions, collaborating with one another. And so we really want to position the virtual twin at the core of our strategy, because from there you can think about ways to better train practitioners, but also to educate patients. You know, if they can see what a disease will be, what will be the impact on their life, they will be more engaged on the prevention, on the preventative side. And then, of course, when you think about practitioners beyond the training, one of the major use cases that we develop is the use of simulation as a way to do pre-surgical planning and improve the outcome of interventions. Because if you can compare different ways of doing surgery to a patient, or if you can compare the impact of different drugs on the disease before you can actually go to the patient, then of course you can improve the outcome. And when I talk about measuring the outcome, here we rely on Medidata that we acquired 2 years ago. That is the leader in the digitization of clinical trials, because in the clinical trial space, there is a discipline in the way to measure outcomes that we think can be applied to the real world, so that not only we can claim to help healthcare professionals achieve medical practice excellence, but you can measure it. And if you can measure it, then you can change the way the healthcare system is financed. You can move from a fee-for-service to an outcome-based care model, or so-called value-based care. So that's our conviction. That's what we're massively investing on, and I'm happy to take additional questions, but I think that's enough to launch the discussion between the different panelists. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire. And so before we move to the questions and the discussion between the panelists, we wanted also to get the perspective from Kamel Zerwal from Serena Capital. So Kamel, you are an investor, so your job is to know what the future of healthcare will be, because this is where you want to put your money to get a nice return. So how do you view the future of healthcare, and where do you want to put your money, because you think those will be the winning bets?
Yeah, I put my money and all my time to help entrepreneurs to build products and to make, you know, a business sustainable in the time. So I wasn't at Serena when Alan was raising the seed and Series A, so it was pity, but just curious about Serena, just to have a better view about what we do. Basically, we are a VC fund based in Paris. We invest in all Europe. We have 60 companies so far, 70 million under management. We have 5 partners. And in 2016, we launched a seed fund named Data Venture, dedicated to data and AI startups. And so it was a pretty good move at that time, because we were the early investors of Liffen, Implicity, Inato, and Norbert. And we learn with these entrepreneurs how go from 0 to 1 and how to build a product and a business in the healthcare industry. It's not a basic business, because you talk about the health of people, but you have a strong legacy that you have to cope with, and it's very, very key to have this understanding to back the right entrepreneurs and to understand what do you do for the next stages, because at the end of the day, we have to build strong operators in this industry. And for that, Charles knows this very well, but you have to convince at every stage that you are on the track to be one of the next big operator in Europe. And for that, you need money, of course, but you need as well a lot of expertise, needs, and help about the ecosystem. In France, we have seen a lot of great things in the last years, and I'm really optimistic about what's going on in the next years. We are the investment side is really crazy, as you can see in the newspapers. We invested more than $7 billion in 2019 just in the healthcare industry, and every year it's increasing. But the M&A side is really interesting as well, and that's something very key for us, because as you say, at the end of the day, we have to make as well a great investment, and the M&A is very key as well, to have to see that this industry can bring great software companies able to work with a big corporate, and with us M&A activities higher than 100 millions and until of course a billion and more, and that's something very exciting for us. We have a strong background of entrepreneurs with a strong ability to execute, and that's something very key for building this next champions. So what can I say to give you more insight about perhaps you have to have a better understanding of about the M&A as well. Just investing is a great thing, but the M&A side is as well a great thing for us. Even speak with and partnering with companies like Dassault, Ramsay. They work more and more with startups, and all the regulation that Laura was mentioned in the first interview is very key. Or the Ségur 1, 2, it's going to put a lot of strong layer to help all these new operators to launch and have a better market access. That's something very hard to do when you are entrepreneurs at INSEAD or wherever, to build the first customers and to convince them. You have to fit with all the regulation, with the cybersecurity, because the data that you are going to process is very sensitive. So all the motion of what we are living in the healthcare industry, from the C to the Series D, is very exciting from my point of view.
And other, Kemal, also some of the building blocks, some solutions that you think will have a big impact. So Thomas made an introduction explaining so that there will be solutions from the preventative side, from the curative side. So are there some specific areas where you look into, because you think that this is where there will be a lot of promises and a big need that are going to address that is not covered today?
Yeah, basically, I think, and you have another technical revolution with quantum computing that is going to bring a lot of value and additional power for the calculation and the data processing. And so all this new area that's named deep tech companies are going to increase in 10 times bigger than the last 2 years. It's going to be impactful, but that's something that we want to learn with these entrepreneurs. We want to learn these markets, but we are not in the typing point about, okay, it's going to be the next big thing. We are in the stage of really connecting the dots between all the ecosystems. Lifen is a good example of that. Frank Lowe, the co-founder, was really picky about just solving a problem, being very back in the earth to provide a value to the customers and to the hospital. And for that, he spent a lot of time to understand all the ecosystem, all the stack, the software that they were implemented. And we are still in this area, in this timing, where we have to fix all these layers before scaling and accelerating the value creation, in my point of view.
Okay. Kamel, thank you very much, and we probably can come back to you. Now I want to give the floor to Pascal Rocher, who has a perspective as a healthcare operator. So you are leading Ramsay Santé, which is the second largest healthcare operator, healthcare provider, private healthcare provider in Europe. So you have a perspective as working for the future of healthcare, as implementing solution for optimizing the efficiency on the one hand, but also as a customer for these new solutions that you are going to select and implement. And also because you have a background coming also from other industry in your past experience, and so you have not been in healthcare during all your career, so you may also help us understand how you contrast healthcare with other industries and see what is typical in healthcare, and that helps you have a specific lens to understand what will work or may not work in that industry.
Yes, thanks, Thierry. Well, first to share with you, we are taking care in Europe of 9 million of patients in 5 countries every year, so roughly 3 million inpatients, so surgery, and what Claire was saying as a strong resonance in order to optimize our 800 operating theater, so mainly surgery, obstetric, mental health, and 6 million of outpatients, mainly in primary cares and imaging, and more and more at-home delivery of care, which is undoubtedly what is expected from the patient. So coming back to your question, Thierry, and to be at the same time realistic and a bit worried, I really think that healthcare is more and more shaped by a couple of trends. First, as Thomas illustrated very well, where there is a growing aging population, so net a growing demand, so payer, which are many times the state, as in France, as of today, as we know, roughly in OECD countries, healthcare represents 12% of GDP with positive elasticity versus the Gdpr rigor. So long story short, so payer, we will have as healthcare player, being hospital, primary care, doctor, there will be certainly more and more pressure for payer. At the same time, patients are becoming more and more active consumer. And finally, and critically, whatever the country in which we operate as a group in Europe and beyond, we've got a dramatic increasing tension on the workforce supply, which has been crystallizing by the COVID crisis. So we are in a very, very rare industry, I think, where in many other industry, and I've spent 25 years in retail banking and insurance. So in many other industry, we can see, I would say, a decreased need in terms of, let's say, people involved versus the consumer. Whereas in our industry, as mainly a hospital provider or primary care, imaging, etc., we need, because there is a growing demand, because the physical and emotional contact is critical, we need more, I would say, physical and manual skills. We've got over 1,000 stretchers in France at this stage. How to replace the stretcher? We've got more cognitive skills, we've got more technical skills, social skills, etc., etc. So long story short, technology in a broad range, meaning IT, software, data, etc., is a solution. And as it was raised by my colleagues, we are partnering more and more in Europe with startups, etc., because we do need to orchestrate the patient pathway in terms of medical quality. Coming back to Claire was saying, to move from a fee from service to a value-based medical outcome. So technology will be the solution in order to answer this trend. So just maybe to give you, sorry, a couple of examples. We've got 25 emergency departments in France. We are not perfect, taking care of close to 1 million of our citizens, but the average waiting time before seeing a doctor is 19 minutes. We've got a real lab app. I was just checking 2 minutes ago on Anthony emergency department. And if we are able, of course, with the medical team to manage this patient with, I think, a great medical outcome only below 20 minutes, it's an addition of, I would say, IT, let's use that word, IT solution, because net ED can be forecast. When you look every week before, I don't know, the Monday between 9 and 10, how many patients in average, how many from cardiac issue, pneumo issue, etc. We have a high fluidity versus empty bed. So shared agenda with the imaging 10 meters close, long story short, it's really technology adding value in order to increase the time by your doctor, nurse, etc., including at the triage, to take a better care and to reduce accessibility. Maybe a second topic to share with you. We are the leader in primary care in Sweden. Close to 1 million of Swedish people are in the primary cares. Primary care, something which is always terrible. One of my colleagues was sharing a person suffering from a chronic disease. In average, close to 30% of these people, they won't take every day what they should take, being insulina, being, I don't know, hypotension, etc., whatever. So we have partnered a year ago in Sweden with a startup, which is a small atom pill robot. For example, somebody who has to take a pill at 4 p.m. every day, the pill is going to appear in a kind of small box, let's say, and if the pill is not taken by the patient, we will make an outbound call from a primary care by a nurse exactly a year afterwards to dialogue with the patient. Do you have any issue? Can I help? Why don't you want to take your treatment, etc.? So we could multiply this example by tens and tens. Liefen is a great example taken before, in which we have been rolling out to make paperless data exchange between surgeon in the operating theater and the GP in towns. And we do need this type of disruptive solution brought by my colleague, brought to by the capital and the M&A, in order, once again, to be able to answer the challengers of the healthcare in the future, going back to this dramatic shortage of medical people, the growing demand, and the consumerism, which is good, as long as it means better medical outcome.
And Pascal, when we discussed about the roundtable, you also mentioned, if I remember well, that because you have operations in Sweden, in the Nordic countries, where value-based healthcare has been adopted before France, you can also have a view, and Claire was mentioning also the concept of value-based healthcare, that the organization by patient pathway on the one hand and the measure of patient outcome on the other hand, that contribute to the efficiency of the system. Where does France, how do you compare France with Nordic countries, and what is the way that France still has to go to be more value-based healthcare driven?
Well, to share a couple of facts, we are really lagging behind. In France, as hospital player, the ONDAM, we are paid every year, being public or private, whatever, the legal status, we are paid roughly 120 billion of euro, out of which this year, only 700 million of euro will be quality-based. It's called IFAC for the specialist. It was 0 5 years ago, so we can look this a glass half full, but it's not going rapidly enough. Contrary, in Sweden, you're totally right, in a primary care center, or we are managing 43 hospitals in Sweden, a large part, close to 20% of our revenue. First, we are paid by patient by capitation, a fixed forfeit per year, and not patient by patient from as a GP in France. And moreover, we've got quality outcome that we disclose to the patient, to the region. As our colleague or competitor, we've got over 80 medical outcomes, such as glycemia, hemoglobin for diabetic type 1, or etc., etc. Maybe one example as a consequence, I'm a strong believer in the payment by capitation for GP in towns. In average, doctors in primary care in Sweden, they are meeting 12 to 14 patients per day, whereas in France, a GP in towns is 25, 26. And we have just opened a couple of primary care in France, thanks to what is called the Article 51, paid by capitation, which is a pilot with the minister, with the regional health agency and the CNAM. I'm a strong believer, this is the future, with commitment from the player, as you were saying, Thierry, on transparency and moving to medical outcomes.
Okay, thank you very much, Pascal. I think that Charles, you had a question to Pascal, if I'm not wrong.
No, there was a question for Kamel, but I think we move past that.
Okay, sorry. So maybe we can move to your question then, so that we start to exchange between the panelists a little bit. Yeah, indeed.
I was about to react on the M&A and mentioning that indeed M&A is something really important, and even at the scale that Alan is at right now. We did our first M&A actually last year. We bought a company named Jor, which we rebranded Alan Mind to enter the mental health market. And it's thanks to that M&A that we were able to enter the market. We had people who had a really strong sense of product and understanding the key needs of people in that super important domain, which is mental health. And so I wanted to basically add on to your point on this.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. And we start to have some questions from our audience that I am going also to give to you, because I have a first question about, yes, it's important. We spoke about patient pathways and measuring outcomes thanks to the digital solutions. And it's not a question to you, Charles, but to all our panelists. And one of the key enabler of these solutions is the interoperability between the different digital pieces, digital building block. And so the question to the panels and to whichever of you wants to pick it, but I think that Kemal had a point on that, is how to ensure that we get to this interoperability of what Laura was talking about, that the public authorities have been putting some rules, but there are still a lot of challenges to create that interoperability so that we have a seamless digital flow of information to back all the solutions that could be put in place, and that it's considered as being an hurdle today. So what are your views about that? Because you are all working on this solution and want to integrate this solution, but Laura was saying in our interview today, we still have nurses that use paper, because even in 2022. So
perhaps, yeah, happy to give you a few insights about that, and Pascal probably will be more specific about how they work with LIFEN. I think it's one of the biggest issue. It's the biggest challenge, because we invested in healthcare millions of euros during the last decades, and for a system not used by doctors, by operators for many good and bad reasons, and that's something very very problematic, because at the end of the day, our money, I'm not talking about VC's money, but I'm talking about the political money and the taxes. We have backed a lot of innovation to try to make it better, but it didn't work so far. And at the end of the day, what is important is to understand if it works or not, and the usage of if the service works is the key KPI for me. So, and why Alan is working, in my point of view, and LIFEN hopefully as well, it's just because when you see the end users, they use your service, and that's something. It sounds pretty pretty obvious and simple, but in healthcare industry, you could invest tons of money without having at the end of the day any users or any traction about people using your software, your service, or whatever, or your product. And that's something that's not possible in my VC point of view, because we have to fit with the market, and provide a value to the customers, to the clients, and that's why you have to spend a lot of time to deeply understand what's going on, who is connecting with who, and how does it work, and how can I make a product and make it scalable. And that's something I think was one of the root cause of Liefen day one, to make the healthcare system works all together. And we see with the way of how we work with the hospital, private operators, or whatever, that's something that we're not only in the technical way. We are really concerned about if it works or not. Pascal?
Just to build on that, maybe just to give the example of Liefen, if I may, or the perspective. Liefen has been concentrating very well on the fact that when a surgeon is getting out of the operating theater, without Liefen, let's put it that way, he was explaining, recording how was the surgery, then an administrative assistant was writing that, and you may be surprised, but sending through by mail, when I say mail, sorry, I mean later, or a fax to the GP in town, because 60,000 in France GP in towns with encrypted mail address, thousands of different software, not only one language, I would say. And so as a paradox, the patient visiting his GP 2 weeks after, many times was explaining to his GP what was the outcome of the surgery. So thanks to Liefen, Liefen is getting out of all the complexity of this interoperability and make things flawless, paperless, by sending in real time the outcome of the surgery to the GP in towns to summarize. And more globally, you're totally right. I would say, coming back to banking, for example, with everybody discovering SWIFT, a worldwide system. In commercial banking, you've got on the worldwide basis 3 or 4 cash pooling software. When I joined this industry 11 years ago to run this company, I was totally surprised by the fact that there were hundreds of small IT companies and so forth. Interoperability honestly did not exist. And if I may, it started by the fact, for many reasons, but the fact that in France, contrary to Sweden or Norway, where you've got electronic medical record from a patient standpoint since decades, we know that in France, le dossier patient, the patient's file that was launched in 2002, was not a success. So now, seeing the glass half full, I really think that the job done by Laura and her team in 2-3 years regarding le Ségur numérique de la santé, health, digital, let's say, Ségur, has been amazing, and that Mon Espace Patient is a cornerstone, the backbone, in order to think interoperability. That's really the backbone and the relevance too, from a patient standpoint. Many patients has a chronic disease, diabetic people can need dialysis, unfortunately, etc. We do need to have this interoperability of all the system for all these patients. We are on a good way, on a good path, Thierry, but we are lagging still behind.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pascal. And Claire, because Dassault is developing very ambitious digital solution, as you described, the digital patient twin. How do you look at this interoperability issue? Because I guess that one of your challenges will be to ensure that your system fits with the overall infrastructure. What's your perspective on that? And sorry, Claire, I just make a parenthesis also for our audience. Please use the Q&R box to put your to give us your question to the panelists if you have, because you are not raising a lot of questions, even though I am sure you have a lot. So please do not hesitate to use the Q&R device of Zoom to submit your questions. Thank you very much. Sorry, Claire.
So interoperability, I don't think I will come back to that because Pascal, you addressed the point and I just subscribe to it. I just want to add some more color by providing 2 examples. Because I think interoperability is good, but it's not enough. You know, when you collect a lot of data from the patients, you want to build intelligence on top of the data. There is such a flow of data, and Perol had put a comment in the chat box. How do you make sense of it? And so what we have developed on the metadata side is a way to combine data coming from all kinds of sources to build intelligence on top of it. We call that sensor cloud, and we really work with an ecosystem of medtech companies that provide wearables, sensors that can collect data directly from the patient in the context of a clinical trial. And so we have built ways of aggregating this data, you know, ingesting, aggregating the data so that you can make sense out of it and build clinical evidence to get your market authorization. So when you're a pharma company, instead of working with a myriad of different small players, we can tell to the pharma companies, which are our clients, you know, you decide which wearable, which sensor you want to use in your clinical trial, and we're going to clean the data, align the data so that you can build evidence out of it. That's the first example. The second one is coming to the twin, you know, a lot of data, there is so much data available, but now we turn doctors into administrative people that spend hours in their daily job compiling data in an electronic health record, and it's very hard to make sense out of it. And here we really believe that contextualizing the data in a virtual twin is going to help people make sense out of it. If I am a nurse and I look at, you know, constants from a patient, it's much easier if I can project it into a twin, into the twin of the patient, because I will understand what this data means. And I can draw another parallel with aerospace. You know, 40 years ago, when you had to design an aircraft, you would hire people that had done a lot of mathematics because they had to look at a 2D plan and rebuild, like build the 3D model in their mind. Now that you have a twin that's available, you can directly visualize and understand what the design is. And so we have been proving that. I think Thierry is in the call, and we did that during COVID time. We have been able to model the twin of the hospital and how the airflow, like how the COVID aerosols are going to propagate within the building. And that has helped healthcare professionals take measures to prevent contaminations. And they kind of knew about these aerosols that would propagate, but when you are able, but you know, you have HVAC, you have air coming in the room, you have air getting out of the room. And when you can visualize the airflow, it's much easier to understand what are the measures you want to take. So I've taken 2 very different examples, but they meet the same point, which is to say that it's good to have access to data. Of course, they have to be interoperable, but you want to see the data in a given context so that you can build sense, you can build intelligence, evidence on top of this data.
Okay. Thank you very much, Claire. We start to have questions coming through the chat. Before we move to the question, I have a question about also the point that Kemal raised about, okay, the solution that will work are the ones that are going to be used, and it's not always easy to understand upfront what, because a solution can look very smart, but it may not be used in practice. And Pascal, I wanted to ask you as a healthcare provider, when you have to integrate and select solution and work with this or that startup because you think that they have a good innovation, how do you assess whether that solution is going to be used or not? And what helps you, what is the lens that you use to analyze that?
Yes, there is no certainly perfect answer. We have been recently discussing with a couple, I would say, of startup, for example, for cardiology. We are taking care in France, well, we are working with close to 500 cardiologists, and we are doing a surgery in France for 1 out of 9 French people in cardiology, being public or private. So long story short, we do want to integrate the patient pathway in cardiology, including atom, sorry, I'm looking for the word surveillance, atom monitoring, etc., etc. So how do we assess when discussing with startup? It's certainly a mix of involving, of course, our cardiologists to understand what is disruptive in this type of things. The background of the people, of course, of the startups, the scientific committee, what is the business model, is it scalable, which is honestly always complex to assess, etc., etc. And there is, to be honest, there is a bit of intuition or versus the background. It's public, so we have been partnering 2 months ago with Resilience, which is a startup created by 2 young founders, Jonathan and Cecile, former founders of Litchi and Pedeboscq, in order to follow and to avoid the prevention, I would say, in secondary prevention and tertiary for people suffering from cancer. Partnering with Gustave Roussy, we are taking care of 35,000 new patients, unfortunately, having a cancer every year. So once again, discussing with the oncologists, listening to this team, what is the background, and there is a bit, sorry for my long answer, a bit of intuition towards.
Okay, intuition and making sure that they address.
Yeah, of course. No, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. Okay, and now we start to have some questions through our chat, and there is one question about the Mon Espace Santé that Laura Letourneau was talking about, and you mentioned as well. So the question is Mon Espace Santé going to change the game? What is the difference from your perspective with the dossier médical personnalisé that was put in place beforehand? What is new with Mon Espace Santé, which was just launched a few weeks ago? How do you see that, and how do you think it will help make a difference? I open it to the panel if one of you has a
couple of words. First, the ergonomy is very good. Secondly, versus many other software, the data are directly put into, I would say, but the key change is versus the previous version on which the French citizen had to be proactive. It will be open except if you disagree. So as hospital provider at our admission desk or with a digital phone tool, it will be open automatically, but if you refuse. So we really think it's this change of paradigm, and then you will have all your data in it. And the use is obviously, in France, we've got this incredible degree of freedom. You can see, to simplify, how many doctors you want or imaging, etc., with an issue of doing 2-3 times the same topic, an issue of relevance. So it will reduce the patient pathway, share data from all the professionals. So really strong disruptive action to have that.
Okay, thank you very much. Other panelists have a point of view on this new Mon Espace Santé that we're all supposed to activate for ourselves, by the way?
If I may answer, I think really the part of being opt-out rather than opt-in is really super key, because people need to be passive in creating compounding of the data that they're gonna have on their Mon Espace Santé. It's gonna be key because if you have no data, you can't have any service on the other hand. But people are gonna volunteer data only if they see the value that they can have through services that we can provide to them. And so having that opt-out part is indeed super key. I think what Laura and team did was that was also super good was to go back to the actual problems that they were trying to solve. The big problem that we had with the 15 plus years of DMPs, where they change the name every time, was that they poured a lot of money with no governance, which basically was what Laura was saying, and they had little visibility on the actual problem that they were trying to solve. They were trying to do something that was all-encompassing instead of focusing on a few verticals and gathering the data specifically for those. I think that one other thing happened since in the past 5 years that was not mentioned on the interoperability, which was GDPR. GDPR has something called data portability in it. It's not well known, it's not well used yet, but it's super key because it puts back the value of data in the hands of the individual. You can actually request your data from any service, and they are due to provide it to you. But something more, the CNIL has opened the fact that mandates, you can sign a mandate to ask a company to do that for you so they can provide better services for you. And I think that having that interoperability with the GDPR plus Mon Espace Santé is going to increase a lot the services that are going to be built on top of that health data. And so we'll make Mon Espace Santé more successful because the data is there, and so their services will come, and so it's going to be a win-win situation.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So it looks like, listening to you, Pascal, we have a system now for the patient, for all the citizens that is probably going to be more helpful and provide more important and insightful data for the actors that want to leverage them, solution in place. But I have a question from the audience, saying, yes, but in the public hospitals, when you go into the walls of the public hospital, the IT infrastructure in these hospitals, the IT system of some of the hospitals, maybe not all, they tend to be very much lagging behind and be antiquated, not very much interoperable. Okay. It's difficult to plug in all these new nice digital solutions that our startups or big company are developing. And we may have good solutions there, but they will be very hard to implement because the backbone of our public hospitals sometimes is too much lagging behind. So
we've got, if I may, Thierry, is the same issue and being private operator. It's an addition of history, and we are all of us working on, let's say, the architecture, the urbanization. I don't know if it is the right word in English of this, but it's a key issue all of us we are facing, to be honest. Yeah.
And so, is there a future champion that you think we should?
But I may be wrong
there, or?
Yeah, and I mean, Claire was talking about a solution for operating theater that's critical, but I think what is very critical is people suffering from chronic disease. 50% of the people, 2/3 of the cost, but more importantly, let's take something totally disruptive, including for the payer. If you take the people suffering from diabetes and insulin dependent, roughly 400,000 people, up to 10 years ago, they had to do 3-4 times per day what is called a dextro to measure the glycemia. Sorry, roughly since some years now, there is a remote monitoring called Freestyle, and by taking their phone and going over, not doing this dextro, in real time, they've got the glycemia. Not only they've got the glycemia, they've got an alert if they are facing an hypo, they could have a coma, or they are in hyper, and even more importantly, the endocrinologists, they are supposed to meet every 3 months, they will have in real time the line, I would say, of the average every day, etc. It's such a change, I would say, and it's so much better. And the French state had decided, as far as I remember, in 2017 to reimburse this because it was approved that by putting some money, you were preventing some terrible disease a couple of years later. So for me, that's, for example, what digital IT, whatever is the right word, interconnectivity between the different doctors, patients, etc. That's a great outcome. So hospital is critical, of course, in terms of IT backbone, but home monitoring, I think, is as much important, if I may.
Yeah, and indeed, Pascal, we have several questions along that topic. Is that okay? We speak about the hospitals, the clinics where care is provided, but there are also a lot of solutions that would help take care of the patient before they have to go to the hospital in a preventative way, or after they go out of the hospital to monitor them at home instead of keeping them in the hospital, be it for ambulatory or for chronic disease standpoint. So how do you see that also that solution evolving, and what do you think are key enablers to help with more patient taking care before they have to go to the hospital and after they go out? What are the levers that you think will be favorable to emergence of, or to speed up this type of solutions?
Maybe on my side, two comments. The first one is a change, as we were saying before with Claire and with Charles, change of the financing rules, I would say. As long as we are paid on the very short term, patient by patient versus a forfeit to take care of a patient per year with commitments and plus and minus if they are not delivered, it will structure the industry. It may be sad to say, but we are players, we are a private company, and like public hospital, I mean, we cannot lose money endlessly. So long story short, the rule of the game financing are critical, and net, in spite of being first an hospital player, I think there will be a shift towards out of hospital preventive action, as you were saying, and on that data, it will become a data game, and this is why we know the GAFA are so interested in the health industry, because it's a data game, and they are certainly, I'm not a specialist, but the champions of the data and so forth, etc. With all the Gdpr issue, of course, it plays.
I think there are two things that are going to be super important inside the hospitals. Is the emergence of technological leaders. By leaders, I mean individuals who are going to be able to take the IT of hospitals from within and make it something that's more usable, and are going to be able to explain it to the people in the hospitals. And outside of the hospital is to build health partners. So it could be apps, it could be different forms, but basically being able to manage your health directly from your phone. That's one of the things that we're trying to do with Anne. I don't know if we're going to be the one health partner, but I think that's what's needed. That super app of health, that where you're going to be able to check your prevention, where you're going to be able to monitor your sleep, your glycemia, your whatever is relevant to your own persona or your own disease. And so prevention and personalization are going to be the two things that are going to change the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to go back to the principle of value-based healthcare, so we discussed about patient pathway, the way that we measure patient outcome, and we can measuring patient outcome following the patient through the patient pathway. We understand also where to invest, what are the points in the patient pathway that will translate into the best outcome for the patient. So that architecture of value-based healthcare, Pascal was telling us that in France we still lag behind the Nordic country, for instance. Where do you view, do you consider that value-based healthcare is a kind of architecture and a vision that would be useful to move France forward? And where do you see, what are the things that we think should be done in France to move the needle on that and to catch up with countries that are more advanced on that? it's not an easy question. It's
I think, now coming back to your question, I think we need to move the needle with the support of the French state, with what is called, sorry to be technical, things such as innovation funds, what is called the Article 51, in order to be transgressive, because if not, you know, many times I said that the CEO of an hospital in France, being public or private, receive an average 2.5 new rules per day to apply. And there are so many governance body in France, I would say, over 10 for a CEO of an hospital, once again, public or private. We need to simplify, we need to delegate. I think we have all of us demonstrated that during the COVID crisis, net, the hospital, we have done, I would say, we have played a role, etc. So we need to delegate, work by confidence. And yes, and we need financial support with what we were sharing before, starts up and so forth. To some extent, once again, no healthcare system, sorry, is perfect. I could tell you the downside of the Swedish system, and that's not the topic today. But in Sweden or Norway, we are very present in Norway, when you've got only 5 million of inhabitants in the country, which is as wide nearly as France, 3,000, you have no other choice than being digital native from healthcare, even for a mother to deliver a baby. How does it work? So concept of medical desert in France would make laugh my Swedish colleagues, if you want, if I may to be a bit provocative in terms of distance, accessibility, waiting time is a bit different. But long story short, yes, we need the support of the French state to change the rules of the game, to be innovative, etc. And last comment, maybe the robot, because I can see there is a question on the robot. Yeah. We've got 15 robots first in France, but when taking care of a patient for prostate surgery, with a robot like our public colleague or whatever at the university hospital, we are paid the same amount of money, while it's a much more additional cost. So there is a cost pressure because it's a short-term view, whereas we're in an industry which needs a lot of capex long-term. So we do need, if I may, a vision of next 10 years in terms of investment, etc., by any new government.
Okay, yeah. Pascal, thank you very much. Kamel, Claire, Charles, thank you. Thanks a lot. We're reaching now the end of our roundtable. So, and thanks for our audience, and Thomas for the introduction, Laura and Trono for our interview yesterday. I hope that our audience found that panel insightful, and we just want to let you know that we organize such type of events on a regular basis, not always a roundtable, but we have an host every 2 or 3 months to discuss topics on the healthcare and the future of healthcare and healthcare entrepreneur in the French ecosystem. So we welcome you to come back to our events. And with this, I'm going to wish all of you a very good night, and thank you again for your active participation tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks a
Thierry.
lot.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.